Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is jayg, and I am your host. Our guest for today's episode is Andrew Batenhorst, who is the body shop manager of Pacific BMW. Andrew started in the industry as a professional detailer in 1999. Since then, he has worked in both the insurance industry and the collision repair industry. At Pacific BMW's Collision Center, Andrew utilizes elements of the Toyota production system, also known as Lean, to eliminate waste from their processes. Notably, Pacific BMW was also recently ranked as the top BMW certified collision repair center in the US at the most recent Conference of the Americas in March. Congratulations on that, Andrew. How are you
Thank you.
doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Jay?
I'm good. I'm excited about this podcast because we had such a fantastic conversation. We've talked several times now at this point, and I love your point of view on things, and look forward to learning more about you and more about the way that you think, because I think you think maybe a little bit differently than others in the industry, a little bit more progressive in a lot of ways. So I appreciate that. But I do have to start with a personal question
Sure.
that is actually probably more self fulfilling for me, which is you were a professional detailer.
Yes.
How hard is that and how intricate is that to really be a good detailer?
It it starts by having a love of cars, I think, from the beginning. And I went through a lot of training, and I had some really good mentors when I first started out. And that was what really got me to start doing it well. And becoming familiar with the products and what they can do and what they can't do is also really important, because I think a lot of people right out of the gate think they got to go buy the top of the line, best products out there, best tools and everything. You can clean a car really, really well with very entry level tools and materials and get a great result. I think what someone once told me, most of detailing is somewhere between like 80% skill and 20% product. So
Interesting.
that I always took to heart, because I saw a lot of detailers detailing with the wrong technique and ending up creating more work for themselves or not getting the desired result. And back when I started, the ceramic coating, phase and all that stuff was way, not even an idea yet. And so we were dealing with somewhat of a, traditional, there were sealants and somewhat advanced polymer based detailing products, but not like what there is now. And it's amazing the results you can achieve even at home without having a professional background, with how easy they make the modern stuff to use.
Yeah, I geek out on that stuff now. You kind of crushed my dreams there a little bit when you said that you don't need the high end stuff, because that's what I tell my wife. I need the brushes, and I need all the fancy stuff. It is really fun though. Like when you start, and maybe this is just me getting older or something, but I'm like, I really get a kick out of detailing my vehicle.
Yeah, no, it's a great stress relief. It kind of is a little form of therapy on its own, and you
Yeah.
can break it up into chunks and do it as time permits. I have a 3-year-old daughter at home, so I don't have as much time to detail as I did when I was in my my late teens, early 20s. But I was always the guy that had the cleanest car out of everybody, and I would always end up helping them to do, on the weekends or after work, we'd hang out and work on our stuff. And I have a lot of good memories from that job. It taught me a lot, even about, as we used to do used car prep as well. So I got good at identifying prior paint work and body work and how to do basic color sanding and polishing. And I got to work on RVs and boats and semi trucks and motorcycles. Our car wash detail center used to have a cruise night every month, and a lot of the guys got to know me, that would show all their cars. So I had a good group of customers that would come see me, the day of the show, to make sure their car was all cleaned up for judging and all that. It was a lot of fun.
What advice would you give to maybe that young person that's out there right now that maybe wants to buff their car out, or do something where there could potentially be a chance that you damage whatever you're going to work on? How do you get past that fear and make sure you don't screw something up catastrophically?
Well, the best way is to not put those tools in your hands at all to start with, because that's just a recipe for disaster. If you're wanting to get your foot in the door with basic detailing and paint correction and things like that, I would say get like a random orbital style buffer, because those you can't burn the paint with like a traditional rotary buffer will. And if you do have access to a rotary buffer and you want to learn, go to your nearest body shop and say, hey, can I have a junked fender or a hood from your trash?
Good
Take it
idea.
home, set it up on a sawhorse, and practice. And who cares if you burn the junk part? It's better to practice on that than it is on your own car, where then if you ruin it, now you're coming to see a guy like me get your car repainted. So that's the best advice. And I even use that with my entry level detailers here in the body shop to make sure that, if they're not too familiar with a rotary buffer, that they have some practice on scrap first.
That's starting off with just amazing advice. I think that's, as we talk maybe a little bit about schools as well, that's such a great opportunity for you collision shops out there, and even just general automotive repair shops, that if you can donate some of those, what you would perceive as junk parts, to a school or to a young person to get them kicked off and
Yeah.
get them interested in what we do. I think there's such an opportunity to help them build confidence and help them get ahead of the curve. So that is super advice to start off. Uh, you started off detailing, and it sounded like it was out of a love for cars.
Yeah.
Is that what brought you into the industry in the first place?
100%. I grew up with my uncles and my grandfather and my mom. We were very much a car family. Both my uncles were master mechanics one worked at an independent, the other worked at a GM dealer in Idaho. And my grandpa also, he was not a mechanic by trade, but he was very hands-on and could fix a lot of things. So when I grew up never really seeing, we didn't take our cars to mechanics, very
Right.
rarely. We did a lot of our own work ourselves. And although they both somewhat discouraged me from getting into being a mechanic, because they ended up needing screws in their neck, and they were, their joints are worn out and all that. I still had a massive passion for it. I mean, it starts out in high school, modifying the car to make it faster and go drag racing and street racing and things of that nature. And it was a lot of fun. And then I didn't, I didn't think I would make it my career at that point. But after being a detailer through high school and through college, after graduating college, that I still wanted to be somewhat connected to the automotive industry. And being an insurance adjuster kind of seemed like I could make a decent living and then also be somewhat around cars. And I did that for about 3.5 years. I learned a tremendous amount about how the insurance industry operates and settling claims and all that. And as time went on, I ended up going to assess cars at very, very high-end body shops all through LA County. And it got
Really?
so that was even, that helped me see what it takes to really fix a car properly to, OEM specifications. And these were a lot of certified body shops that weren't cutting corners. These were like the top dogs of the Los Angeles area. And at that point, I got an offer from a shop that I went to regularly to join their team, and it just seemed like a natural fit. I mean, my love of cars was like, wow, if I go into this realm of the industry, that's just going to take me to a height that I never thought was possible. And then it's like I've never looked back, and here we are. So I mean, now it's going on. 99 is when I started here. It's almost a little over 20 years almost. Where here we
Good
are.
for you.
Yeah.
Good for
Thank
you. How when you're going out and looking at those high end cars, did you have like a favorite or one that's stuck out to you over the years of like, my goodness, I was in the same room as that car even, like I feel like I'll go to some of these car shows and there's a couple at each of them where I'm like, oh my goodness, this is just, this is different level. Right. And like
Yeah.
being able to see that up front and the craftsmanship that goes into them, it's pretty incredible.
It's hard to narrow it down because being in the industry, you have to kind of separate out your passion for cars plus the work from the work of being on a job and looking at a job. And in the insurance world, it was really hard because I'm seeing cars that are obliterated and they're in really bad shape, and you can't, they're generally all dismantled, prepared for doing the repairs. So I was around, a lot of, high end, Ferraris and Mercedes and BMWs and anything in between, and even classic cars. I love American muscle cars the most.
Same.
So every once in a while, I got to go look at a car like an old, Camaro or a Corvette or whatever, something that, more of a restoration shop that happened to have a collision, claim going with it. That always got me a lot more excited. But here I work for a BMW dealer now, and it's a different type of repairing, but I think it lends itself well because it doesn't lead you to get burned out. And if you have a passion for cars and you're working in the industry, a lot of guys I know will say, I can't, the last thing I want to see after a long day of work is another car. And I don't have that problem. And you can ask my wife because I never shut up about cars. But I know the difference between the enthusiast Andrew and the work Andrew, and I don't tend to let them, they don't really cross-contaminate each other. And I think that if you're young and you're getting into this, you have to find that balance somehow, because the job could chew you up if you don't set your right boundaries around what it is you do professionally versus what it is you love about being around cars.
I don't think I was good at that. Starting off my career as a technician, I was also racing stock cars at the time, right? And I just never left the shop. I, was always there. I'd go in the morning, work, at the shop until 5 o'clock, and then go eat a quick dinner, then come back and then work on the race car until 11 o'clock or midnight. Right. Yeah. And at some level it was a lot of fun and I missed those days. But at some point you're like, I definitely burnt myself out doing that because it was not even a different atmosphere, right? It was my dad's shop. So I was just always there. Yeah. And I think at some point you just kind of, you reach your capacity where you do get burnt out, and the things that used to seem really, really cool to you all of a sudden become kind of mundane. And that's the danger zone. But I do give you a lot of credit for being able to separate the two, because that is a really important piece of professionalism and kind of being able to maintain that. So
we're pushing hard to get 1,000 schools on WrenchWay, and we need your help. Auto, diesel, and collision instructors across the country use WrenchWay to share what's new with their program, build and manage industry relationships, and request resources from shops and dealerships that can help grow their program. Schools can request things like shop tours, tool and equipment donations, advisory committee members, and more. The best part? It's completely free. Know of a school that should be on WrenchWay? Send their information to info@wrenchway.com or tell them to visit wrenchway.com and click on the For Schools tab to learn more and sign up. Link is in the show notes.
One of the big reasons I was excited for getting you on is learning more about the collision side of the business. I think a lot of times, especially from my background, I've got a lot of friends in the collision industry, but admittedly, we haven't done a ton with the collision side yet. And it's because most likely it's my lack of knowledge of the collision industry, and really have been being able to put myself in your shoes. But as you and I talked, I think there's so many parallels to just the normal service repair business, and obviously an issue with trying to find skilled labor for your shops. It sounds like that might even be worse on the collision side. There's a real desperation for finding quality talent in the collision business, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have multiple facets of the industry are all kind of converging together at once. You have consumer demand for a high level of technology and convenience in the cars, right? So that's driving, repair costs are going higher. And complexity is going higher. So you need more skilled people. You have an aging demographic of people getting out of the industry or about to exit the industry. And you have a low level of new entrants into the arena of wanting to get in there. And then you have shops that are also not really sure how to run a good operation, and they're kind of fumbling through it, and they're relying on, well, we always did it this way. And what's wrong with that, right? So you've got, in my opinion, it's like that trifecta of stuff all swirling together. And that ride can only take you so far before people are just going to look at what you're doing. They're going to say, that doesn't make sense. Why would I want to get into that field? And that's kind of where we are now. And as much as I want to be optimistic that there's a lot of good forces trying to counteract that, I think it will probably get a little bit more challenging and a little bit more difficult for all of us until we reach kind of an inclination point where then we start to come back up and get out of this.
So what drives you to want to make the industry a better place? Like, I feel like you maybe get it a little bit more than a lot of people, where I think you look at the foundation of the industry and the associations that you're involved with, and maybe the things outside of your day-to-day work. You're doing stuff outside of maybe even what your job description says, right?
Oh yeah.
And what drives that? Because I do think we need more of that. It's really, really important that we get more people involved.
I love this industry very, very much, and I'm tired of being the only guy doing things the way I do it in my region and even nationally. I recently joined the SCRS, the Society of Collision Repair Specialists, and I'm on their board of directors. And I'm now attending more conferences and more meetings around the country. And as I meet more and more collision center operators and managers and owners, everybody's trying to figure this stuff out. And I don't consider myself to be some type of a genius or rocket scientist in the realm of collision repair, but I have had good luck in figuring out how to run my shop successfully and to develop and lead my team. And I think it's important to give back. The mentors I had when I started out instilled in me that, there's a greater good to all this. And sure, there's competitors that you don't want to give everything to your neighbor that's trying to do the same as you. But on an industry-wide level, I think there are relatively simple things that can be done to make things attractive for younger people to come in. And like I said earlier, you can't rely on doing it the same way we have for 30 years, or you're going to end up where we are now, where the industry is in a really tight spot. So if I can give back and I can help, and I had the bandwidth to do so, where it's not going to dominate my whole personal life, why not? I think
Right.
Everybody can. We all take a different perspective to collision repair and what we can do to, if one shop does this and another does that better, and we could collaborate and help everybody collectively improve. I mean, just basic habits of how we formulate our costs for doing a job. There's so much disparity within my zip code, like the guy down the block, let alone the entire nation, right? When there's 28,000 or 30,000 body shops, and we struggle to get paid fairly from the bill payers, the insurers. And I'm not saying we should commingle to control the market, but there
Right.
are best practices that can be shared to help ease some of the burden that we're facing, to help pay better wages and run a smoother operation.
When I say I don't understand the collision side of the business, it's not necessarily the work that's being done. It's the insurance aspect of it,
Yeah.
right? Because that's so different. And to me, it is really hard for me to get my hands around how low insurance companies pay, because
Right.
it is when you're challenged to get skilled labor, and there's an increasing pressure on wages to get that skilled labor, and you're kind of handcuffed based on what an insurance company is going to pay you, right? Because to me, that is that's the toughest thing for me to wrap my head around, is like, okay, so how do you fix that? Because with the increasing pressure on wages, and then the lack of pay or lack of control of what you can get paid, how much of a challenge is that? I mean, does that truly put handcuffs on you in terms of your ability to be flexible with some things?
It can cause a lot of damage to your bottom line, and I think that's again one of my main reasons why I think we're not paying fairly in the industry is because We don't know how to ask for it correctly. We don't know how to write for it correctly. We don't know, we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants, and we're trying to, there's resources out there that are not being effectively utilized. And a lot of shops they may not even understand fully what their costs are to know what is a benchmark for gross profit, for example, or what should they be getting on a labor rate, or how much should they get for a parts discount, or when they're buying material from their supplier, what kind of discount do they offer on that? And so I think when you don't understand that aspect, and then you're trying to sell a job, and you have a very powerful insurer, some of these companies have over 20,000 employees. If you don't know your rights as an insurer, or as a repairer, and you don't know what your laws are, in your market about what governs what you can and cannot do, and you're not involved in our trade organizations, or knowing what the industry is trying to work for, or like in California, the California Auto Body Association, you're missing out on all these tools that can help improve what you're doing. The other common issue is that body shops don't always know their role in how they fit into the claims process. So you have we have no contract with the insurance company in a claim. We are our customer who owns the car. That's our partner. We are, the customer has the policy with the insurance company. We may help ease the process by providing them a quote and photos and invoices and so on that say, hey, this is what Billy Bob's car needs to get fixed. But too often we don't prepare the customer correctly to know what their involvement needs to be in the claim, to help make sure that they put a voice up, and they want to make sure that they're getting factory parts, and that all the procedures are going to be done right, and that the shop is being that they're asking for reasonable things. So you have like this weird triangle, but it's not really a triangle, of these three parties involved that gets very confusing for body shops, and even worse for customers. And people, like you said, as an outsider, you yourself, it is very intimidating. It's a little confusing, and again, if that's you on the outside, there are shops out there that don't really know how to even start handling that correctly.
I had talked with a person on the insurance side, and you've had the luxury of being on that side as well. So I think you might be a little bit more well-rounded in being able to understand that. But I remember hearing from the insurance person, and it felt like there was a lot of correlation to what warranty is as well, right? Where the better the communication, the better you write out your explanation as to what you're doing, the better the repair order, the easier it is to go get the money from the insurer. So I think there's so much there, and it is kind of an art and a science in terms of being able to to hone in on what it is that they're asking for. And like you said, just knowing your rights and knowing kind of what all your insurance policy might cover or not cover,
right.
That kind of stuff. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole podcast just on that alone. It goes very. I mean, every state is slightly different with what their Department of Insurance regulations are. If they're like in California, we had the Bureau of Automotive Repair. That whole concept doesn't even exist in some parts of the country. So how you're supposed to properly get authorizations for repair work and handling supplemental, increases in a job, that. A lot of shops don't know that could open them up to liability and other issues. Plus the whole concept of, well, the shop didn't pay me to do it. It's not I didn't know to ask for it, or the shop said no, but the technician is still performing the work. And then the tech is the one getting short paid for an operation that he did or she did that's not being they don't get the benefit of that at the end of the pay period. So,
on top of all of that, you are in California. That throws a whole other spin on everything, right? That could, again, be a podcast in itself.
Yeah.
I want to talk about your team and what you've done to accomplish what you've accomplished, right? And the importance of being able to keep your people happy and wanting to come to work each and every day, because it is labor intensive. It can be a grind. At times, I'm sure it can be monotonous. Like at times, there's probably some really cool stuff that you can do. But what steps do you take to really help your team be happy and be present each and every day? Because that, as a leader, I think is a really, really big challenge. And to get through the ups and downs of just everyday life, how do you make sure they want to keep coming back?
It's I have to have the wherewithal, and at its base, I can't look at my technicians as a implementer, as a tool for a means to getting a job done. They're people at the end of the day. They're human beings. They have families. They have problems. They have their emotions and all these things. Are we're all complex individuals, and for me, I find that the people side of it comes first, way before the technical nature and tooling and training and all that. That comes first. If I don't care about them and I don't take a vested interest in knowing how they're doing, they're not going to have a lot of faith when I come out there and say, hey, you guys got to do this today, or you need to do that, or I need this job instead of this job. And it doesn't mean that you need to, it's not, showing appreciation can be done in many, many, many different ways. I always make sure I have everybody's birthday written down. I handwrite a card to them on for a birthday every year. I do on their work anniversaries, same thing. I just make sure that, I try to show that, I could be incredibly busy with all these things going on, but I want to make sure that they feel that I care about them. We do barbecues. We have food. We have our own food truck actually at the dealership that we'll fire up to cook. We'll do things, different events. We go out to dinner sometimes. I mean, there's been times where if I could tell it's been a rough day, I've even bought a round of beers there's a bar right down the street, and not everybody may want to come to that, but and that's on me. That's not on the company. Sometimes
Right.
I'll do that on my own, and I just that human side of knowing that there's empathy and caring and that it's more than just the job aspect of it. I found I get better results from them when I do that than if I just was like, hey, when's that car going to be done? Or you screwed this up. Now that never works. It just cut. I always make sure I praise publicly in front of everyone. If there's feedback or a challenge to that they had, that's a one-on-one conversation. That's never had on the shop floor in front of everybody. That's in my office or offsite or whatever. Make sure we're setting a right, having the proper conversation in the right audience, which is them and me.
I think that's a good leadership lesson in general is, the praise be public, the more critical conversation being, one-on-one and talking through it. I think you can alienate somebody pretty easily. And I know there's still a lot of managers out there that will publicly, and not, out in front of their customers, hopefully, but maybe in front of their team, embarrass them. And that is really hard to build trust back up from that, right? Like if you're out and you're kind of publicly shaming them in front of all of their peers, that doesn't go very far.
And the other thing is here is I'm 39, so I'm considered what is that, a millennial, but there's I'm in between Gen X and millennial, and then
I'm right there with you.
Okay, so we're a similar age. So and then my shop, most of them are all Gen Z or people in my age, and I have one person that's in their early 50s, but I think that might still be on the cusp of Gen X. So when you look at people always like to say, well, those millennials, those Gen Zers, they don't, who knows what they want and who knows why they're doing what they're doing. They're like aliens. And when you think about it, every parent's generation has said the same crap about their kid, right? That the hippies, from and baby boomers, the country's going to crap. We're never going to make it. Everything's screwed and all. And it's no. I mean, at their core, you can find them out there, the ones who do want to come do this kind of work. But if you stereotype them and label them, and we talked about this a little bit on our pre-call, the book, The Anatomy of Peace, right? And that book covers a lot of if you label people and you pop them into that category and you put them up on that shelf that's what you are, that's what you represent. You eat your avocado toast and, you have a weird haircut or whatever, and I don't want you in my shop. Then yeah, you're not going to have anybody to, do it, do what you need them to do. And yeah, sure, there's always generational differences. I love movies, and I reference movies from, my area of movies, and I love The Big Lebowski, and sometimes
great movie.
They don't know those quotes, right? And then vice versa. They listen to different music. They have different things that make them happy, but sometimes when you strip away those barriers and you get to know and maybe keep an open mind to like, well, yeah, let's see what they're all about and let's learn more about it. Yeah, you may not use the same slang and jargon and things or dress the way they do, but if you strip all that stuff away and you get to the heart of who they are, the integrity that they have and what their motivators are and what their goals and aspirations are, all that other stuff doesn't matter. They're just people at the end of the day trying to make their way in this country and trying to, get a career going. And that's why I always find it funny when people come up to me and they're like, man, what's it like having all those young kids in your shop? It must be chaos. And no, it's not. It's really not.
No, it's you have a really good message there, and that is, simply treat people like people and treat people like you would like to be treated. The golden rule.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Wrench. We'd like to take a minute to talk about this week's sponsor, Fullbay. Fullbay makes life easier for just about everyone in the shop. Its streamlined workflow helps boost tech efficiency and productivity, meaning more vehicles and more revenue can roll into the shop. Shop customers are big fans of their software too, because it gives them their own portal to authorize work, see how things are going, and even communicate with the shop. Guess what? Owners love Fullbay as well, but not only because it lets them see how things are going during a day at the beach. The app makes it easier for them to send estimates and invoices. And with Fullbay payments and fleet payments, they've made it easier than ever for your customers to pay their invoices. Want to learn more about Fullbay? Head to fullbay.com/wrenchway.
I think from the standpoint of our industry, we went from, a lot of management had a technical background and they got promoted into a position of leadership because they were good at something technical.
Right.
But talk to me a little bit about that transition and really, it's nice to have the technical side. And in a lot of ways, it's the base of everything that you do, but taking it to the next level in terms of, you're a leader now, you're in a management position, and the challenges that go into that. I know I talk to a lot of managers that always say, yeah, when I was sitting on the other side of this desk and I was out in the shop, I just always wondered what in the hell they were doing up front. I just, they're just sitting behind their computer all day or on the phone.
Yeah.
And then when I got in that position, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is tough. This is a really, really hard position. And, I think there's so much perspective that communication can help get an understanding from both sides. And so when you sit down and you talk to them and you have those just general conversations, you can maybe help them understand what you're going through without complaining and saying, oh, my job is so hard, but like sitting down and saying, hey, there's some unique challenges when you sit behind this desk. And I think that helps kind of create some understanding at some level with them.
Yeah, I think the problem is a lot of managers may have been great, like you said, at the job that they were doing or the role that they had before they got promoted. And typically I see, well, maybe the manager took off and now, okay, well, you're the next top performer. We're just going to put you in the manager's seat. But does that mean that they're an effective leader? Does that mean they have the right empathy skills and the right emotional intelligence skills to be able to do all the leadership things that are needed to be done? Because you can be really good at executing tasks and getting things done. I know I was in the beginning, but I did not have all these skills. And this was not something that came innate to me. I had to do a lot of soul searching on my own to figure out what it is I'm actually doing here. Who am I working for? Why am I even doing this? And I'm in a position of power that can do a lot of irreparable damage if I mishandle this. And that's a lot of responsibility. I don't mind the responsibility, but I realized that I'm going to need the training. And I have a whole, like 2 shelves in my bookshelf at home just of books that kind of cover all of the, lots of leadership related subjects. And I even spend time now trying to learn more about philosophy and specifically Stoicism. I don't know if you've heard of Ryan Holiday, the guy
Yeah,
that the
I
daily
have.
Stoic. So I love that, and even though that has nothing to do with collision repair, I find that if my if I am at peace when chaos is happening around me, I can be way more effective than if my head is a swirled up mess and I don't have, if someone comes in with a problem and I'm not in the right headspace to help them and I send them back out with a dollop of crap because I'm dealing with something, that doesn't do me any good. That's going to erode any of the trust they have, and they may not even want to come to me in the future for help. I have to make time to be there to support and guide and do all those things, and it can be very challenging. And I think most managers look at that as like that's Mount Everest to get to that point, and it's not. You just as you have to have the awareness of what you're doing in your shop and how you're affecting other people, and you're in a place of vulnerability sometimes. And I grew up in a military family where we didn't really talk. That kind of stuff doesn't come up. That's not really broadcast.
You don't have
It's
feelings.
like, no,
Yeah.
that doesn't happen. So, and I can admit that I am an emotional person, and I work hard to make sure my emotions don't spill on top of other people and how I self-regulate. That may require meditation. That may require all these other things that are out there. That doesn't get taught in school. And again, it goes back to, okay, you take your top performer and you make them a manager. They don't have any idea about all these other things. And I think they're commonly mislabeled as soft skills when they're not soft. These are very hard things that you have to work on that really make you look hard at yourself and at the core of what does a leader mean to you. And I'm happy to see that this is gaining more and more traction in dealerships and in other shops and collision centers where managers are now being more exposed to what is emotional intelligence, what is empathy, what is what does it mean to develop a person, and that it makes me happy to see that it's starting to get attention. I just don't know how well that will gain traction with managers that are also rooted firmly in we've always done it this way. It feels good. This is my nice security blanket. I'm happy with how things are going. The numbers look good to me on the bottom line, but it's a revolving door of attrition and not keeping people on board. And then you wonder what's going on. Why am I always having to hire somebody? And that's not
You No, it's not. And one of the things that I had said in the introduction to you is how I felt like you're a very progressive person. You had just mentioned something about meditation, which is not something you commonly see in a shop, right?
No.
It's not if across the U.S. you don't see it a whole lot. But talk to me about the impact of that and what it's had on you and your team, because I do think it is so hard, not only as a manager, but in a shop to stay grounded and not let outside distractions take your focus, because you need to be able to focus on what you're doing. And it's so hard with all the outside noise, social media,
Oh yeah.
just everything. There's always something politically charged. There's always something going on that can grab your attention and pull you away.
Yeah.
But I want to learn maybe a little bit about the effect that meditation has had on not only your life, but your team's life.
So I started meditating maybe a few years ago. I'm not some seasoned, expert by any means. And it just started with getting an app on my cell phone and using it to decompress when I would get home from work and to make sure that I'm going to bed, with a clear mind and I'm not chewing on whatever I couldn't digest through the day mentally. And I thought to myself, I wonder what the shop's perception would be if I offered it to them as well in the shop. And so I got permission from human resources that said, hey, I had this idea, I know that the world is in chaos most of the time and we're bombarded with all these things. is it okay if I do like a 5 to 10 minute meditation session with my guys, in the shop? And they were like, yeah, that's fine. Go ahead. So I have a standing rule. It's an unwritten rule now, and there's a little flyer in our break room that says, if from 1 to 1:15 or 1:20, if you want to come after lunch to meditate, Andrew will always have an open door. And I have an app on my phone. We can fire up the app. Doesn't matter if you've skipped for a week or 2 weeks or a month, or this is your first time, whatever. We'll sit and start with breathing exercises and do the fundamentals and all that, and how to focus and unfocus and refocus, and a lot of them took it up on their own to start meditating on their own. Like, we did it a few times together, and then they're like, this works pretty well, and then they were like, this is kind of cool. And now a lot of them do this on their own. Not everybody in the shop, but a fair number do. And the dealership itself saw that this was what I was doing as well. And actually, funny you bring this up, just 2 days ago, they hosted a meditation session for the whole dealer in my shop, and they had someone come out and do they call it a sound bath. And this woman came out, and I think we had 15 people from the dealer that they set up little mats, and they did this in after hours. In a little private area, and did a sound bath meditation. And I think 3 of my guys participated, and then some of the others were from other departments within the dealership. But mental health again is the meditation can help gain that clarity and that insight that people need to be able to work through some of these things. And again, like I said, I grew up in a military family. I think if my grandpa was still alive, he'd probably like, what the hell are you doing, man? It's like, this is like, where did this come from? It's like, what kind of hippie crap is this? And it's none of that. This is meditation goes back to Marcus Aurelius, the Roman Empire days, where, you had great philosophers and doing these things. And how is it that thousands of years ago, they had the idea that this is something that's affecting them, and they need to work on this? And it's like, it's been huge. And again, I don't talk about this with other managers really, because like you said, this does not always get received with the openness like you're asking me now. And that's okay. That's fine. This isn't for everybody, but I think it just shows, again, empathy. And it shows that Andrew's aware that the world can be a little crazy, and that we may need some headspace during the day at work. And if you're going through, a car's kicking your ass and you don't feel good about it, and you can do this for 10, 15 minutes and get back to it. So
I think it's such it's just a way to reset, right? And I think I am probably the most guilty of being old fashioned or old school and not adapting to these new things the way I should. My wife is a yoga instructor, right? Or she does that kind of part-time, and she really enjoys it. She's practiced yoga for, since she was a teenager. And the more I've learned about it, the more I've been like, my goodness, how healthy would that be for techs, like to do yoga? And it's basically, advanced stretching.
Yeah.
And, we talk so much about how our bodies break down over the years. And I look at something like that and I'm like, man, if you could just get past the perception and really get them to understand that this, doing this actually will help increase your productivity, make your body last longer, and maybe not have some of those back injuries and some of the other stuff that we traditionally have in our industry. But even for me, it's hard to wrap my mind around. Like, I kind of think of like me growing up in a shop, and the techs that worked for my dad at the time, like, would they all line up and do yoga in the shop? I think it might be a stretch. Yeah. That's kind of funny that I said that, but it is one of those things where I'm like, how much of that stuff that's outside the box is out there that could just generally help us out in our day-to-day lives, Yeah.
Having people with that open mind. I mean, my guys are covered in tattoos and piercings, and they look like they're rough guys, some of them. And it's that perception. It's hard to shake that because it's permeated our industry for so long, and that's been the status quo. But I think as the Gen Zs and everybody else is entering into our field, and it's probably going to start to pick up pace, I would think that will slowly start to change. And even with more women entering into whether it's the mechanical side or collision, with more women entering into this, I think that will drive the need even more, where stuff like that needs to exist and be promoted by the leadership. And I get it; it is unorthodox, but I want to think that I'm probably not the only one doing this, but I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know any other managers currently, but I hope maybe even listeners of your podcast will start to think like, yeah, maybe there is some benefit to do.
We can take this outside of LA. I can feel it. We can pull this to other parts of the country. I want to talk more about leading a shop because you referred to some of the psychology behind it. One of the pieces of that manager technician relationship that is absolutely fascinating to me is that it really pertains to the shortage and how short we are on talent. We just not even close to enough bodies to fill all of the open spots. But you also have to provide that discipline and that that direction to your team. And at times that's going to require a tough conversation. That's going to require accountability and holding your team accountable to their actions.
Yeah.
But it can also be terrifying because I think in a lot of ways, there's a lot of managers out there right now that are saying, I can't do it because I'm afraid that they're just going to say, you know what, screw you, I'm gone, I'm leaving. Walk me through that process and how you can hold a team member accountable, knowing that they have so many opportunities and probably so many people tugging at their shirt to go work somewhere else. And being able to hold them accountable without alienating them, without making them feel lesser, and making them feel insecure enough to where they feel like they need to leave. It's a really complex subject, I feel like. And I know there's a lot of leaders that really struggle with that. So talk me through that a little bit. How can we do this? How can we properly hold people accountable while also keeping them happy?
So Danny Meyer is a pretty famous restaurant owner, and he has a theory called the salt shaker theory. And what that means is in his restaurant, he wants every table, to be set the same way. And if you could envision like the traditional, maybe Italian red and white, tablecloth with some salt and pepper shakers and a napkin holder and all that, during the day, those items are going to get moved around, right? And they're going to be in a different place and all that. But it's up to the team to put those things back to where they belong, the standard of what the table should look like when a new patron arrives to eat at that restaurant. And that theory is that the manager has to lead that charge. They have to, it's like, what is this? I think it's called persistent consistency, right? And gentle nudging and direction that reinforces that this is the standard of this organization and this is what we expect of you. And again, it just comes down to starting with consistent communication and conversations about what is expected from each technician. So in my shop, each role has its own, what I don't call them performance reviews. I have a plan, a development plan or success plan, if you want to call it that outlines out what the key objectives are for that role and what the non-negotiable policies are of that position that have to be followed. And that is set from onboarding, from right after they're hired. That is gone over immediately, and that becomes indoctrinated into each of those employees. And it doesn't have to be an aggressive conversation, doesn't have to be confrontational. It has to reference back to what you tolerate as a manager. And if you play favorites, if you allow Joe to come in late, but Rick needs to come in. Rick is, has to be here at 7, and there's inconsistencies with your leadership. Yeah, you're going to start to erode the confidence that the team has in you, and you're going to start to open up all these other problems. And it's not that salt shaker theory. It takes you willing to do that. And I think at the root of that, if you don't have good processes for how your business is operating, and you're trying to balance that out and hold a standard and hold people accountable and all that, you're going to have a lot of trouble, and you may not be very effective with that goal of what you have. So I think as it starts out, you got to be bringing the right people on board. You have to be able to set, up what you expect from them, and then you have to stand by that 100% of the way. Because if you back down from that, human nature is going to be, I'm going to take the path of least resistance, and this works for me. I don't care if it works for anybody else. As an employee, this works great for me. I'm going to do it this way, and that's where you're going to start getting deviations from what you expect. And then if you don't put your hand up and pull them aside to talk about it, and you just tolerate it, yeah, everything's going to start to go south on you. And it's hard, man. It's not for the faint of heart. But if you have only that idea of rigid holding to a standard, but you don't have the empathy and you don't give positive reinforcement behind when they do things right, and you only lead with just that standard of it's black and white, can only be that way. Yeah, you're gonna, it's a multifaceted component, and it's not just one way only. There has to be the ability to see the gray, so to speak, in between that.
I think that might be an area that women in leadership might have a distinct advantage over, because I think for guys, a lot of times what happens is we just let it compile and build and build and build, and then it ends up in, some confrontational, big blown out argument.
Yeah.
Rather than just being, we've all been there.
Yeah.
I think you just provided a really, really good tip in general, which, and maybe even from just a mindset standpoint with that salt shaker theory, in that if you can do those little things and kind of point out those little things, and maybe in your head you might think that it's like, oh, maybe I'm nagging them, but it's not. It's being able to set the standard and then reinforce that. I love that analogy, and I love what you said right there, because I think even for me, that's a really, really helpful piece of advice.
Yeah, again, it's combining the some type of expectation with some type of accountability, and how you disseminate that out to the team, and how you phrase it too, the word tracking behind all of that. I look at it as, if someone has a problem and it pertains back to that standard or to that process or that, whatever, if they have good intentions, and hopefully the people that are on your team do, and you've hired the right people on the bus, then it's not so much like they're out to cause, to undermine your operation. It's a training opportunity. And when you word it like that, and this is something that we can help you train on to learn and grow from, and then you measure the improvement and you check in more frequently about that particular lane that maybe they were starting to deviate out of, then it becomes like, yeah, they're invested in developing me because that's affecting the success of the shop. It's a different approach than being a disciplinary action or a punishment. Now, with that being said, if the employee makes the decision to continue to deviate from what you're trying to teach them, and okay, well, that's, you take your ownership of that. That we're doing our part to support you, train you, get you on board with why we're asking what we need you to do, and provide you maybe the dangle the carrot, so to speak, so you have some motivation yourself. That's a totally different interaction than when it's pure disciplinary.
I think at the core of what you said right there, and you mentioned this a couple different times, but it is getting the right team members in the shop and being able to get those good people in, because if you don't, this can go sideways on you quick. And
Right.
I think from setting the standard to the culture to everything, if you don't have the right people, like you said, on the bus, it can make management a million times more difficult if you don't have the right people. And there's so many people in our industry that hire reactively, and they'll take anybody that has a skill set
Yeah.
and put them in their shops, and don't understand the absolute chaos that creates, not only for themselves, but for everybody else in the shop. And it is hard to build a culture once you do that, right? When you start bringing those people that don't fit what you're trying to do in, and then maybe you're getting the kickback on the feedback that you're giving them, and the coaching that you're trying to provide them.
Yeah.
it all starts with good people. And as cliche as that sounds, it is so true.
Yeah. It really is, man. And that's why when I hire, I'm not like in this blazing fast. What our motto is slow to hire, fast to fire. And,
Yep.
you're trying to, I use personality assessments. I may do an in-person assessment for skill checking. I even may have, like, I have an open position right now that I'm trying to fill. And I'm going to have the gentleman that applied come in to spend some time with my existing team to try and feel out what the team thinks of this individual. Does he have a good personality? Is his attitude right? Is he motivated? Is he, reasonably intelligent? Would he be a good fit for us? Because they're the ones who are going to be working with him just as much as I am, and they should have, ultimately they're not the one hiring this individual, but their buy-in and their feedback about them is important to me. I don't want to bring poison into this ecosystem we've created and risk damaging it and ruining what we've been trying to accomplish.
That's a wonderful best practice to get in the habit of, when you're interviewing somebody, let your team interview them. And maybe even if they're not going to be a fit, at times, I think when you let your team talk to the person and they come in and they echo what you're saying, it reinforces what you think, but then it helps give that shop buy-in to who you're bringing in. And, so many techs talk about that they only feel like a number and like a tool, as you said, to produce more.
Yeah.
When you start doing that, I think you open the doors to them thinking, hey, I am part of this thing. Like this, my opinion counts. They care how happy I am out in the shop. And it's such a little thing that can make such a huge, huge difference.
Yeah. I even have them involved with helping write the SOPs for the shop. I have them on I have them printed on foam board that hang in the shop, but I did that on purpose because they can easily be replaced. As the job may dictate a different set of things that we have to do, it's important to get their buy-in to the processes that they're involved in and say, hey, do we need to do this step? Should we remove this? Is it still relevant? How, the amount of time it takes, the quality that's associated with it. Are these all things we should continue doing? So we review that annually to make sure that they're still good. And again, that goes back to buy-in and relevancy and feeling like they're part of something that's important. And it's not just Andrew's in his ivory tower making all these calls and throwing the gauntlet down saying, hey, you got to do it this way or you're out of here. That doesn't work. So
let's talk about, and we're coming up on the close of the podcast, but I want to get your thoughts on the future of the industry. And as it relates to the collision side, a lot of technology being introduced into that side. Where do you see the collision business going in terms of workload, in terms of people, in terms of how we get more people into the collision business? Give me an idea of maybe what your vision is for the future, or maybe the outlook as a whole of the industry. Can we get this thing turned around on the talent side?
Yeah.
And are those opportunities going to change over the years of what a collision shop looks like?
I think overall it's optimistic. I say that because I feel that there are so many good things going on in the whole world of collision that are really trying to rapidly adapt to what's going on. And I don't know on the leadership front how much that will keep pace with the changing technology and all those other issues we talked about earlier. But I do think that we are going in a good direction. I just see that the vehicle complexity is going to drive up repair costs, which may end up driving up insurance premiums. And you're also going to see a lot of shops not being able to compete with buying the right equipment, investing in the training, and willing to put in the time to develop these younger technicians. And because of that, I think you're going to see a smaller amount of shops that are more focused on doing certified higher end repair, and the DRP model of insurance partnerships with shops may start to shift more towards doing more certified level repairs. But again, I think the consolidators, which are the big companies like Caliber and Crash Champions and Classic Collision and all them, they're still going to keep doing what they're doing, but they're also having to adjust their business model too to account for changing vehicle demands and the fact that there's so many restrictions and limitations on what you can do. On a technician side, I think now's as good a time as any. If you're looking for a career to get in, make sure you find a good shop and do your homework. Don't just show up blindly to an interview. Research the crap out of whoever you're trying to work for and ask good questions. Most of the time during interviews, I don't get that many questions back from people, and it's like, I remember when I was interviewing for this job, I was in there for almost half the time was me asking questions versus the questions that were asked for me. So I do think that we can overcome these things, but managers and leadership and owners, they got to want it too. They have to want it just as much as these younger people do that want to come in. And if you don't want it that bad, do yourself a favor and get out. Don't destroy what is happening right now. And it's, sell your business, get into a different line of work, but you have to be able to open your eyes up to what you do and how it affects the entire operation that you're trying to run. And I think with more training and more of these skills becoming normalized in our industry, we can overcome these things. And I hope my goal with doing what I'm doing is to kind of spread that awareness that, it doesn't have to be this crazy in our world. It really doesn't. We can fix this. But you got to want it at the end of the day.
That's a good message to end on. I really enjoyed this conversation. That hour flew by, and
it really did.
It is. There's so many other things that we can talk about, and I think as I get more familiar with the collision side, and as WrenchWay gets more involved with the collision side, it's folks like you that give me the encouragement that our industry's heading in the right direction. We've got really good leaders. We've got good people in this industry.
Oh, yeah.
And it is a really good industry to be in when we can really all be on the same page and rowing in the same direction. So I applaud you for everything that you're doing out there.
Thank you, Jay.
The things that you're doing over and above, again, what your job description says you need to do. It's very inspirational. And I look forward to the next time we do this, because this was such a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much for having me on here. And I hope that your listeners, and this spreads through. I know you're predominantly mechanical, but I hope that the collision side starts to gain traction. And I look forward to doing another one of these with you soon, Jay. It was a great talk.
All right. I appreciate it.
That wraps up this week's episode of Beyond the Wrench. Be sure to tune in next week for another brand new episode. As a reminder, don't forget to rate and follow Beyond the Wrench on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps us get Beyond the Wrench in front of other fantastic shop owners, managers, technicians, and dealers just like you, so we can continue to help improve, promote, and grow this amazing industry. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week.